Hello and welcome to the Wavelo Stream of Thought podcast. I'm Paul McCluskey. I'm joined today by Gary McDonald, who's our VP of Product Management. This is an international edition today. So I'm a Brit based in California, and Gary's a Canadian based in Spain, although he's currently at our HQ in Toronto. We just got back recently from DTW in Copenhagen. It's been running there now for about 25 years, I think, the show. It's changed quite a bit over time. To give you some statistics on the event, we had about 4,100 attendees this year. About 25% of those were from service providers from around 200 different service provider companies. There were 58 Catalyst projects, which is an enormous amount, but they are a great way of innovating and showing how the TMF standards can be used to solve real-world problems. Some of the big hyperscalers were there. Google were very present. They had a big booth. Very different to the early days of the event. So, I don't really want to admit how many times I've been there, how many years I've been going to the show, but it's definitely changed a lot. It's quite different to some of the other industry events. If you take something like a Mobile World Congress, 100,000 plus attendees, but only a small percentage are actually service providers. So a much broader scope, whereas this is very focused on OSS and BSS, which is great for us and the other folks there. So coming into the event, it's interesting. I think in the news, there's been a lot of talk, announcements from service providers talking about their AI initiatives, giving themselves specific targets or goals, mostly around productivity or revenue improvements. I think examples would be Deutsche Telecom, Liberty Global, Telstra is another. So Gary, there was a lot of reference to AI and all the branding and the messaging. Like everywhere you turned, every sentence had the word AI in it. It was omnipresent, so to speak. But what's your take on, how it looked in the exhibit hall versus what you took away from the reality, if you like, of the initiatives that you were hearing about in the sessions that you attend?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to escape AI, isn't it? I think we've heard or seen it everywhere, right? Just about every conference we've been at, and that's no surprise, certainly. But I think what was interesting at DTW this year was really kind of the pace of innovation being driven by AI, right? It's no longer, strategic exploration that the operators are taking, right? There was more of a focus on the real world execution of those AI models, and a lot of talk about the early ROI that a lot of these operators are starting to see now implementing these models. So even comparing to, attending MWC a few months ago to now, I think there was definitely more an emphasis on, the models that are being implemented and the benefits that the operators are seeing, whether that's in the network with network assurance, more personalized experiences for customers, and then even, in the internal operations with things like ticket classification and that kind of thing. So it's clearly no longer just a buzzword. I mean, we were kind of reflecting, walking around the floor a lot, right? You saw a lot of just about every booth, right, had some form of a positioning of AI, right? But that really kind of manifested on stage at a lot of the events, a lot of the speaking engagements where there was a lot of discussion on the live implementations. It wasn't just really about, what vendors and operators intended to build. It was more about these are the expected tangible outcomes that they expect to yield from these AI deployments. So, for all the talk about AI coming and, in the news and certainly in our industry, it's here, right? And it's fast, and really the industry is really adopting it and implementing it.
I think that's fair. We were recently at Network X in Denver just a few months ago, so not that long ago. There was an interesting vibe there in that there were a number of operators on stage talking about their projects, their AI so AI innovations, if you like. And there was a bit of a theme there in that so many of them were talking about data being something of a roadblock and quite a challenge for them in getting much further down the path of implementing the initiatives that they were hoping for. So I'm curious to see if you got that same sense coming out of DTW, whether there's that same underlying theme, if you like, where data is really the necessary component of all of these different initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think in pretty much every session that I attended during the conference, one kind of key message kept coming up, and that was the need for telecom systems to modernize, right? And of course, that's something, that's, near and dear to us as Wavelo. That's something that's our primary mission statement and what we do. So the operators are clearly looking at, and there's a big push to look at ways to make things more modular and composable as a way to start to break down those data silos, right? And sort of looking at how to build these data pipelines into all the siloed data that sits across the telecom stack and trying to bring that into these kind of big unified data stores or data lakes so that their AI models can actually access that data, populate the AI models and implement those. The problem with that is that, of course, most telecom systems still run on these legacy systems. That data is really scattered across a bunch of disconnected applications in the stack, and trying to take that data that is distributed across all these systems, funnel that into kind of one data store is of course no small feat. The idea of having these kind of common data lakes has been talked about in the industry for many years, right? And it's a difficult task to complete, and so make that more complicated by the different schemas, the different structures that exist in the data, and trying to get that into a place where these AI models can look at it and try to make sense of it is of course very difficult. And see that as an opportunity for us. So that's where our event-driven architecture can really come into play here and help out the CSPs, rather than having to build all these data pipelines into those data stores, right? If you can look at the change in state of the data, right, and translate that into an event stream, right, that's a much better way, we feel, to then start to populate these AI models. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but yeah, data is absolutely a roadblock, and that was common with just about every speaking engagement I attended through the conference. So
yeah, it's interesting that it's sort of ubiquitous at the moment. We had a couple of announcements at the show. We had our Internet of Moving Things Catalyst, and we also had a press release that went out about our recent CEM certification with the TMF. Let's talk about the Catalyst. It was really good to see the collaboration with the other vendors, and also having BT Group be a part of that as well. So having a customer always brings things to life. I quite like the premise too, the drone example. It reminded me of the drones I see here. So the electric company is forever sending drones up over my house. There are so many tall trees here, and everyone's worried about fire risk. So they're constantly making sure that nothing's growing to the point where it's getting too close to a power line. What's your opinion on the applicability of the Catalyst use case that we chose, and where do you think that could go next, perhaps at next year's TMF and the next phase of the Catalyst, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to your point, like the Catalyst use case is a real world application, right? You provided one example, and we saw earlier examples of that at MWC earlier this year, where KDDI, Telefonica, the Policia Nacional in Spain were all showcasing how they were using connected drone applications, whether that was enhancing police operations, doing things like bridge inspections, facility patrols, the like. Here in Canada, my alma mater in terms of CARES, where I used to work, they have a use case where they're actually using drones to plant trees, in various parts of Canada. So in any event, the Catalyst, great partnership, as you noted, across BT Group, CGI, OpNet, Ulster University. And we kind of sat as almost like the connective tissue, orchestrating a lot of the data flow between those different parties. And so the title of the Catalyst was the Autonomous and Scalable Internet of Moving Things, IOMT ecosystems at scale. And this was phase 2 of that Catalyst. And so brought a few different parties to the table, us included. But as I mentioned, we were really kind of the connective tissue of the Catalyst. And the objective of that was really to look at how do you operate and manage millions of connected devices that operate in these unpredictable environments. And you think of how a drone kind of has to respond to its environment, respond to objects it's detecting on its mission, this kind of thing. There is a lot of data that it has to process. There's an expectation, right, that that data is being processed with low latency on the network, and, all to really kind of optimize the mission that the drone is trying to complete. And so as part of that kind of data flow that we facilitated, that was enabling some AI applications that OpNet and CGI were building based on that data flow from the drone into their systems. So from, telematics to things like computer vision, being able to detect objects and, respond to things in that environment, or even to just detect things like low battery power right on the drone and determine if rerouting was necessary, or, sending a command to return that drone to the base station. So you kind of see how, all of these things need to happen in real time. They need to be very, very responsive. And, again, that's where really kind of an event-driven architecture comes into play, because it is that real-time responsive architecture. So in terms of, I think the next phase of that, probably a bit more of a focus from kind of the technical POC that has taken place so far to more the commercial application of that. So thinking about things like how charging and billing integration come into play. So, applying charging policies for different SLAs on the network, that kind of thing, as well as more focus on kind of the AI-driven feedback loops, the real-time kind of network event orchestration, those kind of things.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be quite interesting to see. I think, especially with all the focus right now on monetizing 5G for the enterprise, then that feels like a very valid next step for the use case.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the certification quickly. I know this relates to our event-driven customer journey. It feels quite unique, I think, when you consider the API-centric nature of the TMF, and we're sort of sitting alongside it really with our event-driven architecture. What are your thoughts on the value prop of this event-driven approach, and how we leverage the TMF standards and bring the two together to create value for the customer?
Yeah, I mean, first, we're obviously very excited about the certification. I think it's probably the start of many certifications we intend to embark on with TM Forum. But, most it gives, I think, confidence that the approach we've taken has been validated against industry best practice, right? So that should really help alleviate some of the concerns prospective customers might have about embarking on, modernizing their telecom stacks using an event-driven architecture to do that. And really what the certification is, a conformance assessment of the event-driven architecture and the customer journey that event-driven architecture provides. So validation of the system architecture against TM Forum architectural patterns, tools, the models, the guidelines that define TM Forum's customer experience management frameworks. Like I said, we're really excited about this. Again, it kind of validates our approach and gives customers the confidence that they can work with us to help modernize their telecom stack.
Yeah, that's great. And it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm curious to see how those conversations go with real customers, and how how we can bring that to life for the prospects that we're talking to at the moment. In terms of the show, in a broader sense, we already talked a little bit about the importance of data, and also the advancements in AI implementation versus maybe only 6 or 12 months ago. Were there any other themes or trends that you picked up? Because I know you had a bunch of meetings, you went to some of the sessions as well, so you probably had a good overall sense of what was being discussed. Was there anything else that stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate, the big themes were certainly around the data as the bottleneck, the kind of evolution of AI and how that's being implemented commercially. But, obviously there was a lot of discussion about modularity and, how, I guess, the CSPs were using the ODA canvas to kind of, implement that modularity and allow for more, partner ecosystems that are emerging, right? I think the pace of innovation around that's being driven by AI and just the need to evolve these commercial solutions is requiring partnerships across the telecom ecosystem, from the CSPs to the vendors to cloud providers, the hyperscalers, right? They're all in some way, shape, or form collaborating, right, to deliver customer solutions and looking now at how they implement AI. Clearly there's a need for modularity to kind of plug in various components that those parties bring to the table to offer these solutions. And so to, do that in a standard way that the ODA canvas offers, that was discussed quite a bit. So really, the collaboration around that, the partner ecosystems, modularity. The other thing that was interesting was, I think there's a tendency to kind of think about AI in terms of solving these kind of big bang problems. AI is going to save the world or rule the world, depending on how you look at it. But there was certainly a theme around focusing small to start with, like look at specific ways to ingest AI models into business processes or workflows. So looking at in terms of maybe the order orchestration, how do you implement AI into that, maybe to offer more personalized offers, right? Focusing something specific in that workflow rather than trying to throw AI at everything that's involved in that, right? So, and over time, I think work through these partnerships to kind of bolt on other AI capabilities and continue to advance that. But again, really, I think the big focus was modularity, the kind of rapid pace of AI and the adoption of that. And again, what all the CSPs are doing to try to resolve those data bottlenecks and pull that data in to furnish these AI models.
Yep. I think if I look forward, we have Innovate Americas coming up in September. So that's one of the other TMF events. That one's in Dallas. I know we'll likely reuse some of the great content that was produced for the DTW show. And I'm sure that we'll have more to talk about in terms of integrating the event stream as well with the TMF APIs. I think that's going to be of interest. How do you see the engagement with the TMF evolving as we go forward from here?
Yeah, so I touched on what we're already starting to think about for phase 3 of the Catalyst, right? The kind of more focus on the commercial deployment of the drone use case, bringing kind of charging and billing models to that, and more on the kind of closed loop automation piece with our partner CGI and OpNet. So continuing to advance that with TM Forum as well. I touched on it earlier with the first certification. We see that as an opportunity to really start influencing future certifications that are driven around event-driven architecture, right? And so, how can we be at the forefront of that, helping TM Forum and TM Forum partners to, define those models, define how to best use event-driven architecture to kind of plug into their existing telecom stack, to solve more kind of real-world dynamic problems that they're facing. So I think some of those discussions have already started to happen, and so we're excited to see how that evolves.
Excellent. So I'm looking at the time. I should probably be letting you go, as I know there's a lot happening in the office there right now. We have our AI Summer Jam happening. So for those listening, this is where we invite employees to share their innovations that leverage AI. Maybe that's a good place to wrap up. And perhaps, as a final thought, why do you think that's important to us as an AI first company?
Yeah. And so I can't remember who said it. It's kind of a common, I think, the reference to kind of the best way to learn AI is to just start using it. And I think that's the truth. I think most of us who, adopted AI, in its earliest form have, really started to look at new models and ways to use it. And so we across Wavelo, even through our parent company, 2Cows, have looked at ways to kind of gamify the use and implementation of AI tools internally. And so we've got a big annual event happening tomorrow, which is our AI Summer Jam. You might hear some of the noise in the background. The AV team is doing some tests on stage here because it's going to be a, big event here for the team. And so we've got a number of folks in the office this week for that. But really the idea is, in gamifying that internally, right? It's to encourage the use of the AI tools, but more so it's to help our team members in a fun way become proficient with the use of AI. And as a result of that, we can pass along our expertise to our customers to help them adopt AI tools and solutions within their business. So in fact, today we just awarded our first AI Test Kitchen Award, as we're calling it, for a solution that our head of agile practice here at Wavelo introduced to the team earlier today in a company-wide meeting with a solution that she had pulled together that helps identify blockers when building and deploying code. So there was a lot of excitement about that. I think there's a lot of excitement about what our team members are thinking about and how we're using AI, and excited to see what the team brings forward tomorrow.
Yep, I think it should be fun. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap it up. I want to thank you again, Gary, for all your insight from the event and sharing your perspective. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we hope to have you drop in again soon on the Wavelo Stream of Thought podcast. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul. Take care.